Well, good morning and welcome to Metro's 2016 I Am Inclusion Days. I'm Jim Wynn, Acting Chief of Fair Practice, and I'm very proud to be a part of this event and the program our team has put together for you. Now, as you know, we always start in Metro with a safety contact and a customer care contact. So for our safety contact, please get your flu shots. With the hot and cold weather we've been experiencing over the past couple of weeks here, it is essential that you have it. From a customer care standpoint, to my fellow Red Line riders, please be helpful of our patrons, especially those who look lost after they have to get off at Fort Totten, okay? Throughout this week, we want to continue presenting diversity and inclusion as a business enabler for higher organizational performance and a vehicle for assisting leadership in achieving our top priorities of safety, service reliability, and financial reliability. In fact, this year's theme for I Am Inclusion Days is Inclusion Equals Safe, S-A-F-E. Now, the S stands for supportive. We are supportive of each other. A stands for authentic. We bring our authentic selves to work. We are not fearful, nor do we hide our true relations and understanding of how something is working or not working, no matter our grade or our position. The F stands for foundational. Inclusion is foundational. To what we do, we must be mutually respectful, fair, ethical, equitable, and trusting with each other. And the E stands for expected. Being inclusive is expected. We must hold ourselves and each other accountable for being inclusive. We actually believe success in our safety efforts require the physical repair of our system and safe behaviors. We mean that safe behaviors prompt employees to speak up and work towards solving problems together and proactively to avoid or resolve issues that could escalate into severe or catastrophic outcomes. Safe behaviors are vital to our success in all that we do at Metro. Top business organizations throughout the nation who have invested in strategic diversity and inclusion efforts like we have begun to undertake here at Metro have realized proven increases in employee satisfaction, improved problem solving, service innovation, and many more benefits because people bring their best to work every day in an inclusive work environment because they want to and they are motivated to contribute their all. Again, you still have an opportunity to register as a walk-in for our workshop today on disability inclusion. We've entitled the session, It Could Be You. It could be you because one never knows when or if they will be faced with a sudden medical condition that could impact their ability to perform the essential functions of their job. The workshop starts at 2:30 and it will be held next door in the meeting room. And now, to continue with our kickoff event, I would like to invite Andrea Burnside, our Chief Performance Officer, to introduce our keynote speaker for the day. Thank you, Andrea.
Thank you, Jim. And good morning and welcome to all of you here on our first day of Metro's 2016 I Am Inclusion Days. Let me begin by introducing myself. As Jim said, I'm Andrea Burnside, the Chief Performance Officer. And I'm very happy to be part of this great event, particularly to be up on the stage with this motley crew of characters here. Your participation today is quite inspiring because it reflects your commitment to inclusion and your understanding of having an inclusive culture here at Metro. Our speaker today, Lenora Billings-Harris, is an international speaker and diversity and inclusion strategist who specializes in helping organizations make diversity and inclusion a competitive advantage. She's the author of 2 books and was named by Diversity Woman magazine as one of the top 20 influential diversity leaders in the United States. She's included among the top 100 thought leaders on diversity by the Society of Human Resources Management. Lenora was the 2014-2015 president of the Global Speakers Federation, and this year received the highest honor for professional speakers in the United States, the Cavett Award. A few of her clients, her many clients, include NASA, Ritz-Carlton Hotels, FedEx, Toyota, West Point, Johnson & Johnson, as well as numerous professional organizations. Additionally, Lenora serves on the adjunct facility of the University of North Carolina, Greensboro. Although she currently lives in North Carolina, she has presented to audiences on 6 continents and 33 countries, plus in the middle of the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. And I'm hoping that she's going to speak more about that because I'm real curious whether that means she was on a ship or something. So with that said, let's get ready to have fun as we learn, and please help me welcome Ms. Lenora Billings-Harris.
Ubuntu. Ubuntu. I promise it is not a curse word in any language. So before I tell you what it means, I need for you to say it with me. Ubuntu. Now, the reason I share that word with you is because when I was looking at the acronym SAFE, that is the underlying foundation for these next few days for you, and hopefully will stay in your mind for many days and many weeks and months to come, I realized that that proverb actually pulls all of the words together when we're talking about inclusion. Ubuntu is a Zulu proverb that I learned on one of my trips to South Africa. It means I am because you are. You are because I am. In other words, we're connected. I need you to be able to do what I do effectively. If you didn't need someone to come and speak to you about what I'm going to be sharing with you, I wouldn't be here. So I need you. I hope you see that you need me in order to look at diversity and inclusion perhaps a little bit differently than you have in the past. How many of you, when you walked in and you heard the music and saw these characters, began to think, what the heck does that have to do with inclusion? Right? Most people do, and that's a good thing because that means at least you're curious. So I hope you will be willing to go on this journey with me, but I need to tell you a few things first, or share with you a few things. Because my grandparents raised me from age 2 to age 10. And one of the things my grandparents told me is the same thing I'm sure your guardians or parents told you. And if you have kids, you've told them. How many of you were ever told, don't speak to strangers? How many of you have told young people, kids, don't speak to strangers? Now, there's good news and bad news about that. I know that my grandmother told me not to speak to strangers because she was concerned about my safety. I grew up in Newark, New Jersey. Not quite in what people would call the ghetto, that word we don't use anymore, but I was in walking distance. So she would say, don't talk to strangers. The bad news about that, however, if I never talk to strangers, I'll never get to know anybody. And unfortunately, that's what happens to us in the workplace, is we have in the back of our head whoever it was that said to us when we were little, don't talk to strangers. And so when we're working with someone who looks differently than us, who speaks different from us, who comes from a different place than us, wherever that is, our brain thinks they're strangers. And I'm about to invite you to go down the yellow brick road with me. And I'm a stranger to you. Now, you did learn who I am professionally, so now I want to share with you who I really am, and then hopefully we can be friends. Now, as I share this with you, think about anything that I share that you might relate to in some way, okay? So, as you know, my name is Lenora Billings-Harris. It's pretty long, so please just call me Lenora. I'm American and I'm proud of my African heritage. I'm a baby boomer. In fact, I'm 66. Now, I know some of you are a little surprised that I shared my age, but I'm on a one-woman mission to change the American value around age. You see, Americans do value age, as long as you don't have much of it. Unlike the rest of the world, where other cultures value age the more you have of it. And so I decided, I am proud of every year that I live, because the other alternative is 6 feet under. So I'm happy with my age. Let's see what else. As I said, I was born in Newark, New Jersey, but I've had the privilege of living several different places. So I'm a former Virginian, I'm a former Michigander, I'm a former Philadelphian, I'm a former Phoenician, that is what they call people who live in Phoenix, and I'm working on becoming a North Carolinian. Now, I've been in North Carolina for 20 years, but I'm still working on becoming a North Carolinian. Anybody here from North Carolina? You'll know what I mean when I share this with you. See, my North Carolina friends tell me, you're not a North Carolinian. And you can guess one of the 2 reasons they tell me that. Because I, don't sound like it, right? I don't have a North Carolina accent. So that's one reason. The other reason, which they tell me is worse, I don't drink sweet tea. I'm working on one of them, y'all. I've been married to the same guy for 42 years. And he and I realized that we were fortunate to find each other and get it right the first time. We are child-free, not childless, which simply means that we chose not to have kids so that we could spoil everybody else's and send them back home. And back to my grandmother. After I had moved with my dad, who had custody of me, she, several years later, she retired and she started going on cruises to the Caribbean. But I lived in North Jersey. So several of my friends had something I didn't have. And she said to me, Lenora, well, when I go to these various islands, what gift would you like me to bring you? So I said to her, well, Grandma, bring me a pair of bangle bracelets. She did. So each time she went to a new island, and she went on several cruises, she would take it upon herself to find another set of bangle bracelets. She's no longer with me physically. This is how I stay connected to her spiritually. I never take them off, much to the chagrin of airport security. I love those big machines now. All I have to do is put my hands up instead of getting, searched all over the place like it used to be. Now, I don't expect you to remember all those things about me, but I have this question for you. Was there anything, as I shared my background, that you could relate to? Maybe you lived someplace I lived, you have relatives that live someplace I live, you might have been raised by your grandparents. Was there anything at all? If there was something, raise your hand. Okay? Now, here's why I share that with you. Remember Ubuntu? We are all connected. And the more we can understand we are connected in a way that is advantageous to both of us, then maybe we can be more willing to truly be inclusive. Now, the other reason I share that with you, as I said, is because I'm working on becoming your friend, not a stranger. So now that you know me a little bit, would you be willing to ease on down the yellow brick road with me just a little? Yes? Okay, good. So, is there anyone who has never seen any version of The Wizard of Oz or Wiz? It's okay if you haven't. It's really okay. But we just do want to know where you are. So I think I saw 2 hands going up. If you're sitting next to a person who raised their hand, then if they get curious about any of these characters as I talk about them, it's okay to whisper to them. Although, even if you've never seen it, I promise you, you'll be able to follow the story and the connection. So let's get started. Well, the main character of The Wizard of Oz was Dorothy. Dorothy is a change agent. And I say is because her story is alive and well. She is a change agent, and what you didn't know until just now is when you walked into this room and you heard Wiz and the Wizard of Oz music, and if it was Wiz in particular, you might have moved around a little bit because it has a great beat. You may not have known that your middle name became Dorothy. Guys, just go with me on it, okay? It's your middle name, okay? Your middle name is Dorothy because Dorothy was a change agent and you chose to be here today, which says to me you're interested in change, which says to me you're at least curious about this topic of inclusion and all of the pieces connected to it. So you're a Dorothy. Well, Dorothy had really important things to say. If you remember in the very beginning of the movie, you know, the part that was black and white, she had really important things to say, but nobody was listening. Auntie Em was too busy. She went over to Uncle Henry and he was too busy. She was determined somebody was going to listen, so she even walked over, and I'm not going to walk toward a person right now. She walked over and talked to the pigs. Now, there are 272 mistakes in the movie, by the way. This is just a quick aside. For those of you who really like the movie, the next time you watch it, see if you can catch them. The first one of which was when she walked over to talk to the pigs. She fell in the pigsty, remember? And then she got out of it spotlessly clean. Now, I'm from New Jersey, but I know that if you fall into a pigsty, you're not going to get out clean, right? So in any case, she got really frustrated, like many of us do, when people are not listening to us. So she decided to leave home. Here's my question to you. When you're at work, or anywhere for that matter, but since this is work-focused, to whom do you listen? Who do you really listen to? And who listens to you? Who might have something important to say, but you're not taking the time to give them the space to listen? What we know from research is that we interrupt people, especially in team meetings, constantly. Men, you do interrupt women more than women interrupt men. Women interrupt other women 79% more. So everybody's busy interrupting everyone else because we're not listening. We're only hearing and waiting for you to put the period at the end of your sentence so you can jump in. Well, perhaps that's what was happening to Dorothy, and so she represents those employees that don't get heard and they leave. Or they don't leave, but they retire on the job. They just didn't tell HR. So Dorothy left home, and as you know in the beginning of the movie, she left home and she's in this forest, and she came upon this character. Now, we're going to talk about him much more in a little while, but she came upon this character who was smart enough to know that she needed to go back home because a storm was brewing. So she went on back home, but when she got there, the tornado was so close that everyone had already gone down into the storm cellar. They couldn't hear her yelling. So she and Toto went into the house, and you know what happened? The house got caught up in this tornado, and it went up and went up and went up. The tornado represents that whirlwind that you work in every day. Because it took great choice for you to come here. There is no good time for a speaker, for a workshop, or for anything not directly related to what's on your desk or what's on the computer or what's on the work you have to do, right? Because our brains are saying we're getting paid to get this work done. So there's no good time to fit other things in, yet you chose to be here anyway. All of those other things, however, that's the whirlwind. And when you leave today, when you leave at the end of the week, hopefully you will attend everything. I wish I could stay because with Michael Eric Dyson and Janet Moot, I would love to be here and hear them speak. What an honor and a privilege you have to have them with you. But when you choose to come, there's going to be this whirlwind. And guess what? Those things, the people that are not here, and those things that you have to do on that whirlwind, it's going to stay there no matter what you do. So change agents have to figure out, how can I make some change happen without getting used up in the process? Because change agents, another word for them is a catalyst. How do I make change happen without getting used up in the process? Because I have to tell you that many of us who do this work full time, whether internal to an organization or externally, we get burnt out. We get too used up. And we need that time to be replenished. What we could do to replenish ourselves is to broaden our network, broaden the people like yourselves who are interested in this topic, to see how you might make a difference in your own area of influence here at work. So in any case, the house got caught up in the tornado, and as you know, the house landed in, help me out, Oz. It landed in Oz. And as Dorothy and Toto started coming out of the house, they were looking around, and you know, Dorothy said, "Oh, we're not in Kansas anymore." But we got introduced to our first set of Oz characters, and they were the Munchkins. Now, a lot of times the Munchkins think, well, they were all alike, just like sometimes we think about people. They did have something in common. They all were short in stature. But other than that, they each were uniquely different. Even the three triplets that came out to dance were each different. Now, don't tell the people who are not here, but the Munchkins represent the folks you work with. Now, don't tell them this because they won't understand the context if they're not here. But here's why I mean that. You see, the Munchkins really represent a good deal of all of our behavior. If you remember in the movie, the Munchkins didn't come right out and say, "Hi, my name is, and who are you?" They didn't do that. They didn't do that. Instead, they stood behind some bushes and giggled while they looked at Dorothy and Toto. Now, maybe when they were giggling, they might have said, "What is that furry thing?" They'd seen a horse of a different color, but maybe they had never seen a dog that looked like Toto. Maybe they said, "You see those shoes she's wearing? We got to change that." Now, I know you're saying, "Now, wait a minute, what does that have to do with people that I work with?" I'm going to ask this question vicariously. Do not answer it out loud. When someone new comes into your department or your division or wherever it is you're working, what do we start doing? Checking them out. And then we might even chat with somebody that is a friend of ours. He's new. I wonder what kind of change he's going to make. I'm going to have to train somebody else. Now, I know that doesn't relate to you, but it could be somebody that's not here today. Now, it's reasonably normal for us to do that because our brain is always looking for friends versus foes. We know this neurologically now. We could only suppose that before, but we actually know that now. So our brains are always looking for friends. Well, what are friends? Friends are people who look, act, sound pretty much like us. When in fact, sometimes our brain says someone's a foe when they're not really. We just haven't taken the time to get to know them because we're busy criticizing them like maybe the Munchkins did. But the Munchkins did eventually welcome Dorothy. Here's the catch. They did not do that. They did not come from behind the bushes until Glenda, the good witch. How many of you have seen Wicked? All right. Then you know her name is Galenda. When Galenda comes down in this pink bubble and then tells the Munchkins, "It's okay, you can come out. It's safe," then they came out. Now, how does that relate to you? How many of us don't take that first step of change until somebody else tells us it's okay? Even though in our head and our heart we know it's probably safe and it would be okay to get to know this person. But many of us wait until someone else tells us. And Glenda was a person of authority. Now, here's another reason that we might wait, especially if it has anything to do with diversity and inclusion. Well, I'm just going to wait over here until they start doing things different. You know who the they are this time, right? Anyone who has a level above yours. When they start doing things different, then maybe I will. Here's the problem with that. You see, all of us are on this yellow brick road together. The yellow brick road represents our own diversity journey. And we're all on our separate journeys and collective journeys at the same time. So if every one of us waits until somebody else changes, then no change will happen. And in the meantime, those best ideas, those best problem solving will go astray because we never would have heard them. So nevertheless, Glenda was that person in authority. Glenda, by the way, also represents sponsors. You see, Glenda was wanting to take care of the Munchkins, and she kind of, because of her powers, could see a lot of things that were going on. Glenda represents the sponsors in our lives. Sponsors are different than mentors. You know who your mentor is. You have an open relationship with that person. But sponsors, oftentimes, we don't know who they are. Sponsors are the people who open doors for us, and we didn't even know they did it. They're the people that are in the rooms talking about us, about potential positions in the future. They're the ones who speak on our behalf, and we often have no idea they're doing it until maybe sometimes later. Sponsors are the people who see your potential before you see it within yourself. They help create permission for you to lean forward and to take that risk and to take that challenge because they already believe in you. And here's the catch. Look at Glenda, look at the Munchkins. Our sponsors might not look just like us. You might have a sponsor that is someone you never would have imagined is opening a door for you. Ubuntu. So the Munchkins finally came out. They started greeting Dorothy, but they made an assumption. You see, the Munchkins also represent that Munchkin mentality of stereotypes. Since Glenda said that it was safe, they interpreted that. They inferred from her words that Dorothy was a good witch. So they started treating her well as a good witch because that's what they guessed. But here's the thing. Even though they were treating Dorothy very well, Dorothy realized it just didn't quite feel right. And she decided, no, maybe I need to go home. You see, when it wasn't feeling quite right to her, what she realized is they were projecting something onto her that was different than who she was. She was not really being authentic, or she didn't feel that they saw her authentic self, and she decided to go home. Now, we'll get back to that in a minute. So when she decided to go home, she, of course, didn't know where she was. And so she said, well, I live in this place called Kansas. How do I get there? And, of course, everybody said, I don't know. And then they said, but there's this real smart guy named the Wizard of Oz, and he lives in Emerald City. I bet he could get you to this place called Kansas. She said, okay, great. What do I need to do? And they said, follow the yellow brick road. Now, when you watch the movie again, notice how people walked around the yellow brick road. They stepped over the yellow brick road. A few actually stepped on it, but few followed it. You see, that comes from our own fear of the unknown. when oftentimes it's not really unknown. We're just afraid to take that first step. So she and Toto go down that yellow brick road. Remember, our own diversity journey. They start going down this yellow brick road, and then they came to a fork in the road, and they had to make a decision. And as you know, there was this scarecrow in the fork of the road, and he was making some noise. Now, Dorothy thought it was a little bit odd that a scarecrow was actually making noise, but she was an inclusive kind of person. So she helped the scarecrow down, and the scarecrow said, "Oh, gee, I don't have a brain." He thought he did not have a brain. Now, some of us, not you in this room, but some of us come to work, and as we get off the train, if you are taking your trains to work, as you get off the train, you leave your brain in the train car. Or if you drove in DC, I'm not sure people will drive, but in DC, if you drove, you might leave your brain in your car. Or maybe you left it all the way at home. Because do you not interact with some folks that you say, where is their brain? That's because we're so distracted, we're not paying attention to what's right in front of us. Now, we know that we shouldn't text while we drive, even if it's not, in this area. Nowhere should we text while we drive. The research tells us we absolutely shouldn't do it, but see, we do it anyway. Some people do it anyway, because you say, oh, that's those other folks that don't know how to text and drive at the same time. So my point in sharing that is, even though we have new information, Maya Angelou used to say, when you know better, you do better. She was wrong. She is near and dear to my heart, but that was wrong. Because if we knew better, once we knew better, we would do better, then nobody would text while they drive. So we know we have to do more than just know something. We need to have some sponsors. We need to have the knowledge about people different than us so that we become more comfortable. And here's the catch, is when we're interacting with somebody that's different than us, in whatever way it's different, because it's not just ethnicity and race and gender and sexual orientation, it's all those ways we might be different, like being from the North and living in the South, or vice versa, any of those kind of things. When we're thinking of those things, rather than get to know the person, it's just easier to grab whatever stereotypical thought we have about people who fit that category. And then we just keep going on, instead of getting to know the individual. So Dorothy said to the scarecrow, well, you need this brain. I'm going to see this guy called the wizard, and they tell me he's pretty smart, so I bet he could give you a brain. Come on with me. But she said, but I still need to figure out which way to go. And he said, well, go this way. Oh, go that way. Oh, gee, I don't know. Somehow, they must have gone to commercial, because somehow when the story comes back, they're going down the road again. So they must have chatted during commercial, right? Anyway, so they go on down the yellow brick road, and then they come to the next character. Which character was that? The Tin Man. I know some of you have seen it more than once. So they saw the Tin Man, and the Tin Man also was grunting a little bit, but he couldn't move. So Dorothy found the oil can, and then, put that oil on him, and he started moving around, and he said, I could be a much better Tin Man if I only had a heart. Sometimes when we're thinking about people that we work with, and we get a little bit of information, maybe about their culture, or about, the language, the first language they may speak if it's not English. Sometimes when we get a little bit of knowledge, we think we know it all. What we forget is we need to go 18 inches south to connect that knowledge to our heart. Because knowledge in and of itself is not enough. We need to also connect it to that heart, which is the compassion, which is the willingness to say, I don't understand, but I want to. I don't know you, but I want to. I know I may have done some things that maybe didn't feel inclusive, but now I want to know what those behaviors are. So it's not just about knowledge. It's about connecting it to the heart so that we can be civil, so that we can have compassion for people different than us. So she said, come on with me. He did. They go on down the Yellow Brick Road a little bit further, and now they're in the forest. Again, deeper in the forest, and out jumps the cowardly lion, right? And the cowardly lion said, I could be king of the jungle if only I had courage. You know, we all have courage, each one of us. Each of our courage, though, is different. So your courage is different than my courage. Your courage is different than my courage. And I can't borrow yours. And if you pass on before me, you can't even leave it to me. I can't use your courage. Now, I don't know where it is we go after we leave this planet, but wouldn't it be a shame if each of us passes on and has left over unused courage? When in fact, most of the time that those things that we're afraid of, what's in our head is way beyond what the reality is. When if all we would do is take a breath and engage the thinking part of our brain instead of the emotional part of our brain, we would realize this is not a dangerous circumstance. This is not a foe or an enemy. This is a person who wants many of the same things that I want. Love and belonging and being heard and all those things. So we need to be willing to lean into that supposed fear and start using a little of that courage. So they all go down to Yellow Brick Road and now they can see Emerald City. They are so excited. So they start running. But you know there was this other character that didn't really want them to get there. This other character called the Wicked Witch. She wanted Dorothy's shoes that the good witch had given to her, and she just did not want anybody to get something that she didn't have. So as they were running, they got sleepy because they were running through a poppy field. But just as it looked like they were never quite going to get there, Glenda shows up as snow. Remember I said our sponsors show up and we don't even know who they are or what they look like? So Glenda makes it snow and they wake up. They didn't even know it was Glenda. They wake up, they get to Emerald City, they knock on the door. And by the way, with this Wicked Witch, she represents those barriers in our lives. And most of the barriers are bigger in our head than they are for real. So the Wicked Witch represents those barriers. And the monkeys, remember the monkeys? They represent distractions. All those distractions that we have, all those things that say, no, don't do this, go do this over here. It's easier. So in any case, the barrier gets overthrown, so to speak, by Glenda. They get to Emerald City, they knock on the door, and a person sticks his head through the door and tells them they can't get in. Now, we ultimately know that that person was the wizard. However, the wizard, oftentimes when we think of the Wizard of Oz, we think, oh, the wizard, that was the smart one. Well, I'm not suggesting that he wasn't smart, but he could have shown more of his wisdom if he was not afraid that people would not accept him in the package he came in. He was afraid people wouldn't love him just the way he was. So he wore lots of masks. How many masks do you wear? Now, all of us wear them. We wouldn't be able to get through the day without them. We wear masks based on what culture we're in. We wear masks based on the culture of the workplace, based on what part of the country we live in, and the people we interact with. So let me give you an example. So I'm wearing a mask right now with this ensemble, I'll call it. Now, I'm wearing this mask, and I call it a mask because I knew I was invited to be your keynote speaker. I knew I was invited to kick off the week. And I presumed that you would have some kind of picture in your head about how I should dress. Now, I know you saw a picture of my face. I'm trying to keep looking like that picture. And I figured, if I showed up in my authentic attire, you might really think not only was I a little bit weird, but even the people who invited me, because my authentic attire would be a t-shirt with Yoda on it and Mickey Mouse slippers, big yellow feet like he has. And I'm trying to figure out where I'm not supposed to stand. There we go. And so if I would have shown up wearing that t-shirt and those slippers, now some of you would have come in saying, yes, we get ready to have a good time. But others of you might have thought, oh, I don't know about this. And you probably were a little bit leery already because of the Wizard of Oz characters. So my mask is to be professionally dressed, not stiff suit necessarily, but something that I thought would not be a barrier for me or you. So my point is that we have to have masks to get through the day. But the wizard represents those folks that wear masks so much they don't know who they are anymore. And sometimes we create that in the workplace. Sometimes people are wearing a mask because they don't feel it's safe enough for them to be authentically who they are. Sometimes they cut their hair or they grow their hair or they keep their hair straight because, I don't know, the way I want to wear it might not work. You see, I just handled that totally by cutting mine all off. But we'll go back to that question I asked you in the beginning. Who do you listen to? Who do you give power to? And who listens to you? Are you listening to them in their authentic self? Or do you only hear them when they fit your mold of what's appropriate? So they finally get to who they thought was the wizard, the big scary thing. And the wizard said, well, you got to go get the witch's broom. So they go off to get this broom. Now, would you agree with me that this is a diverse team? Yes. Here's the thing about this diverse team. Each one of them had different strengths, and they used them to accomplish the goal. They even had strengths they didn't think they had, because the scarecrow used his brain, the Tin Man used his heart, and the lion used his courage. They got very innovative, and they finally get the witch's broom and come back, and they see this big scary thing again. Now, that represents, for some of us, we do what you told us we needed to do in order to be more effective in our jobs or get the next promotion or whatever it might be. We did all those things. We checked all the boxes you told us to. But then when we came back, the rules changed. Somebody said, no, not quite enough. You need to go do this now. But they got a little frustrated with that answer. And it took Toto the dog to find the real wizard. We call dogs man's best. Toto didn't care what package the wizard came in. He just was looking for a friend. He just was looking for the real person, because his compassion was unconditional. It wasn't I love you or I like you based on the package you're in or how you speak to me today. Maybe Toto represents the authenticity in all of us, both the authenticity we're seeking and our own authenticity. Ask yourself, what masks are you wearing? You see, the more masks that you have to wear at work, the less you're able to give 100%. Because you're busy trying to make sure that mask doesn't slip off and people see the real self. When in fact, there's only one person you can be better at than anybody else on the planet, and that would be your authentic self. So the wizard comes out and he gives the scarecrow a brain and gives him a diploma looking thing. And he gives the Tin Man a heart, and it ticks, and the Tin Man says, now my heart's breaking. And then he gives a medallion to the lion for courage. You see, sometimes we need symbols to help us know that we're okay just the way we are. And that's okay. Just don't depend on them because they're symbols. So then when it was time for Dorothy to get what she wanted, which was to get back to Kansas, the wizard says, oh, you know what? I'm taking a hot air balloon tomorrow, and I know where Kansas is. Come on with me. So they go into the town hall, and she gets into the basket for the hot air balloon, and Toto did what dogs do. He saw a cat, and he started chasing that cat, which made Dorothy get out of the hot air balloon. What's the message? Be careful who you follow, because they could be full of hot air. Be more willing to trust that voice inside that's connected to your head and your heart. Be more willing to listen to people that might be different than you. It's amazing the wisdom that comes out of the mouths of children if we're quiet enough to listen. The same is true with the people that we work with. Ask yourself, who am I listening to? Who am I following? Who might be my sponsor? And more importantly, who could you be a sponsor for? Who could you invite to have lunch with you just so you get to know them? Who could you decide to be around because you're most uncomfortable around people so-called like that? More times than not, whatever it is we fear is just that, false evidence appearing real. It's not anything worse. And you live in a part of the country where you have such a rich diversity. All the multiculturalism here. You can go to festivals of every possible ethnic group and nationality you can think of. Now, just eating and greeting is not enough. You do need to get to know people more deeply. Now, and one word of caution, as you reach out this week, hopefully intentionally to get to know people different than you, some folks will be willing to share a lot. Other folks, not so much. Honor both. Don't start criticizing that person that doesn't want to talk about their ancestors or their ethnicity. They have a reason. And be willing to share yourself. Now, if you're a people manager, I know it's hard to do some of the things I just talked about because, if you're a leader, you think everybody thinks you have all the right answers. And you may be fooling yourself too. I gotta have the right answers before I go reach out. But you see, we're all on this journey together. And what the rest of the team is looking for is for you to be a little bit vulnerable. That's what happened with the wizard. They're looking for you to be authentically who you are. So be willing to share a story about yourself. Be willing to share a time maybe where you made a little bit of a mistake from the inclusion perspective, because that says to your staff, you're human. Let me give you an example of that. And then I'm going to open it up. We have a few minutes for questions, I understand, and then I'll totally close. So here's how I mean that. Several years ago, I realized that I didn't know much about the Jewish religion. And Tracy Brown and I were members of an organization together, the National Speakers Association. And one of the things that the National Speakers Association would do is the convention would always be over a weekend. And so they would have a Jewish, if anybody wanted to organize for their particular faith, they could get the room for free from the staff of the association at whatever hotel we were at. So there would be a Jewish service on Friday, and then sometimes one service or another on a Saturday, and a lot of services on Sunday. Now the good news was anyone could come. So I decided, I don't know much about the Jewish faith, and I have never been to any type of a service, so I'll go. So I went into the room. I got there early, and I sat in the back of the room, just like you all are sitting right back there thinking I'm not going to pick on you. So I sat all the way in the back of the room. The room was about this size, and I sat back there because I thought, well, if I do something stupid, everybody won't see me. I won't be right up front. So there was a wonderful service. And then I happened to look over my left shoulder, and I saw a table. Now, by the way, I was raised Christian, a Baptist, and I saw some bread, and I saw something red that looked like wine, and it was in a canister. So by now, the room is full, and there are people sitting on both sides. Now, this is an association, the meetings to which I go all the time, and so I knew several of the people in the room. One of my friends was sitting to my right. Her name was Joanne, and she is Jewish. So when I saw what was on that table, I leaned over to Joanne and I said, Joanne, is it okay if non-Jewish people take part in your communion? Communion. As the word communion was coming out of my mouth, I wanted to grab it back, but it was too late. She laughed, but not too loud. I don't think anybody heard me except her. And she said, well, Lenora, we don't call it communion, and you are welcome to take part in that part of the ceremony. Now, here's my point. I went there to learn something, to have an experience, to deepen my understanding. I opened mouth and inserted foot. Guess what? The sun still came up the next morning. Nothing bad happened. Joanne got a good laugh, and I learned something. I suggest to you that the same would be true. Be willing to ask that question that you think, oh, this might be a dumb question, so I better not ask it because other people are going to criticize it. Well, guess what? If you don't ask the question, you're never going to know. And then you will be more likely to make a mistake. Be willing to listen, fully listen, and hear, really hear what the other person is saying. And if you're on a team and somebody shares a great idea, and then it goes 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, and then somebody else repeats exactly the idea that was already put on the table that nobody paid attention to, and somebody else now repeats it. That's called sight-sound bias, by the way. You see, the package it came from just didn't fit the package in our head that it should have come from. So when that happens, you don't have to wait for the team leader or the boss to say, oh, Mary, I love the idea that you had put on the table first. You don't have to wait for that. When John repeats the idea that Mary had put on the table, then you as a team member can say, John, I am so glad that you like Mary's idea. Now let's all talk about it. So that everybody gets a chance to be inclusive, to really hear. Now those are my words. Obviously they need to be your words in a team. So I've talked about the yellow brick road being your diversity journey, the tornado being the whirlwind of work that's going to be there whether you're there or not, quite frankly, and about all of the characters: change agent, brain, heart, courage, authenticity, masks. And the monkeys, I did tell you, they were just distractions, right? And the munchkins, it's the munchkin mentality that we have to be careful of. So before I close completely, who's got the courage to ask a question? Because this was a fable. Let's talk about real stuff. Who's got a question? Yes, thank you.
My question is primarily based on biases and based on your experience. Are there practices that one can use to help them overcome their biases?
So the question was, what might be some of those practices? Okay, so first of all, we can't get rid of our biases. We have them. All of us have them. So that's mistake number one. We think only those people, whoever those people are, have biases. But we all have bias. And bias in and of itself is neutral until you take an action based on the bias. So your bias is just a thought. It's a mental association and or a preference. And it's just a thought in your head. So I have a bias toward wearing black. You know, a woman of a certain age tends to wear more black. So that happens to be my bias. But, you know, that's not good or bad. It's not hurting anybody one way or the other. But then we have some other biases that we take action on, and those might become stereotypical thinking and then discrimination and all those other words that we have. So we first want to ask ourselves, okay, which one of my actions might be giving me a result different than what I intended? Because what we know now is most of our biases are unconscious. So, you know, we know some of the conscious ones, but most of them are unconscious. So in the workplace, we've got all kind of biases built into our processes, built into our everyday actions. So to answer your question, one thing that I would suggest to personally get in touch with your unconscious biases is to take the implicit association test online. And so if you Google implicit association and then click on the website that is harvard.edu, I think it's implicit.harvard.edu, but anyway, just Google implicit association test, and then that test will come up. It's an online test, and it's been there now, just continuing to add more and more to its database based on the people that take it. It is free. And it will give you the results of your test. So you may decide to take a test to figure out what your unconscious bias is around race in the US. So it might be black, white primarily, or people of color and white folks. Or you might take it on people from other nationalities, other parts of the world. Or you can take it on gender. Or you can take it on sexual orientation and sexual identity. Don't take them all at once, by the way. That'd be a little overwhelming. But pick one. Do this when nobody else is around. Do it in, you know, the computer at your home, perhaps, because it's one of those things that's based on time. Don't try to beat the test. You can't. Now, one note of caution. You probably won't like the results. Because remember, it's measuring your unconscious bias. So you may take it thinking, well, you know, I know I'm going to do well on this. So for instance, the very first time I took it many years ago, I'm African American, and I took it on race, which at that time was the only one they had. And I'd already been doing work in the space of diversity and inclusion, and I'm thinking, well, I'm going to get a pretty good result. It was not as good as I wanted it to be. Because what I realized was, you know, I was born in this country, bombarded and impacted by all of the messages that all of us have. And because of my immediate environment, I was bombarded with messages that made me have an unconscious bias toward white people more than people of color. And when I realized it, I'm like, oh, that can't be. But then I realized, no, the learning is in getting that message so that I could then become more aware, well, what might be some things that I'm doing that may show or may presume that one person is, I'm trying to really do this a lot so you can get this picture. There we go. I think you got it just now, right? So what is it that I can do to become more aware of what my behaviors might be, where maybe I'm sending microaggressions to people of color and micro advantages to Caucasians, European Americans, white people, whichever term you prefer to use. So that would be one thing to do individually. The second thing that you can do is to find someone you trust either inside work or outside work. I usually advise people to do this outside of work first. Find someone you trust, not your partner or spouse, however, because there's too much emotion connected with that relationship. But it could be a girlfriend or a buddy, and say, based on everything that I experienced during this week of inclusion, I am inclusion. I want to work on my bias toward people younger than me. Those millennials or Generation Z that is following them. And maybe you're a baby boomer. So what you say to this person you trust is, so since I may have unconscious bias in that regard, whenever I say or do something that shows that bias, I need you to let me know. Now, don't throw me under the bus or the train, as it were. We really don't want to have that kind of danger. Just when we're by ourselves, let me know what I said or did, because it's unconscious. Remember, I need you to bring it to my conscious level. And then you work on that. Ideally, you do that in both directions, you and someone else. They work on something, and it doesn't have to be the same bias. You might work on something else. So you work with each other on that. Then when you come into the workplace, put on that inclusion hat. And it's a real simple question you can ask yourself. How would I feel if that would have just happened to me? What we now know from research is that, many of you might have heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and it starts with safety, and then it's security, and goes up to self-actualization. And it has stood the test of time. Anybody that took Psychology 101 in high school or college have learned this. But what now researchers are discovering is that third one, which has to do with belonging, is really the first one. When we do not feel that we belong, our brain processes that exclusion the same way it processes pain. So think about it. When you're trying to be included and you're excluded, particularly if you're excluded because you're being authentically who you are, you're not wearing the mask somebody else wanted you to wear. So at work, think of how you can increase that belonging, increase that inclusion, and find other people to do the same. Time for one more question? Thank you for asking that. Yes. Okay. Oh, yes, you do. It's not for you, it's for everybody else.
Well, I guess since my middle name is Dorothy, like Dorothy, and it's like a three-part, and it's based off of something you had just mentioned or whatnot. Like Dorothy, I've been professionally in situations where I have not been heard, where I believe that I have not been heard or understood. So therefore, I do, like Dorothy, want to go away, right? So you go away and you think about it or whatnot, and you say, well, I got to work, I got to do my job, I got to accomplish, so let me come back, right? And like the Munchkins or whatever, I've also been on the side of them where it's like I'm looking at this situation and I need that sponsor, Glinda, to say, okay, this is okay. With those three characters, my question is, how can I, Dorothy, be more independent and not necessarily have to rely on Glinda for me to maybe speak better or be heard or believe I'm being heard, and then two, also accept, I guess, whatever it is that's in front of me without needing someone to say it's okay for this to be like this or to accept this or whatnot. So how can I be a stronger Dorothy in a sense versus where I don't I don't have to rely so much on the sponsor, and I don't have to take the role of being someone who is judging or have these biases or whatnot and needing someone to tell me that it's okay that I don't have to.
Excellent. And your name is? Leo. Okay, thank you so much. So there's several things in that question, and so let me try to pull them together. First of all, your sponsors are usually people you don't know exist anyway. So they're going to be there. They are the people who see your potential even when you don't see it. And we want to have those folks because it just is how the world operates. There are going to be people sitting in rooms talking about who's got the potential to be in the next job or who should we give this stretch assignment to, and you're not in the room. However, the way you can give them the words to say on your behalf, even though you don't know who they are, is to do your current job to the absolute best of your ability. Now, I know that kind of goes without saying, but truly, do your job well. Unfortunately, though, many of us think what we should be able to do is just show up and do our job well, and then we'll get ahead. Because we erroneously think that we live in a society of meritocracy. People get ahead because they're good at what they do. Sorry to break this to you, that is an aspiration. We want to work in that kind of society, but we know that we don't because of bias and unconscious bias and the things that people make up. So back to your question is you do your job to the best that you possibly can. And when you feel like you're not being heard, look around to somebody that might be able to empathize with you. They don't have to be a boss necessarily. It could be another coworker, could be someone working in another division. That's why you want to reach out to people different than you to get to know folks. But reach out to someone so that you have somebody to bounce this off. Say, this happened and I really didn't feel heard. How can I handle that the next time? Now, if the person who is not hearing you is someone that you feel like the space is safe enough, and only you know that, I don't work within your organization, but if the space is safe enough, then you go to that person offline and say, by the way, you know, when we were together and I wanted to share this idea, XYZ, I felt that you were interrupting me or not hearing me, or whatever the behavior was that made it exclusionary instead of inclusion, because most of the time when people are doing that, they're not realizing it. Assume positive intent. All of us are so busy trying to be who we are, we don't have time to try to mess up somebody else's life. Really, we don't. You're not that important, meaning as you think of other people, you're trying to just make it. So assume positive intent. And then be willing to have an offline conversation with that person. Because many times just bringing it to their attention is enough for them to change their behavior. Now, you know, there's a whole workshop around giving feedback of sensitive information, but make sure they know what you're talking about. Don't try to give them 5 things at once. One thing, one behavior that you would like them to change. Bring it to their attention. Help them know how you feel when they do that. When you interrupt me, I feel disrespected, I feel unheard, I feel whatever it is. I would prefer that you let me put the period on the end of the sentence. And if you're willing to do that, I know we're going to be able to solve this problem faster, be more innovative, get along better, whatever it is that's in it for them. Most important question at the end of that interchange, however you use those words. Are you willing to work with me on that? Notice I said, are you willing to work with me on that? Because from their eyes, it's my problem, not theirs. Even though I'm trying to get them to change their behavior. So you own it as your problem, and then as soon as they do anything that shows you they heard you more, you give them positive reinforcement offline again. You know, Harry, I realize you didn't interrupt me this time. I really appreciate that. You know, so in whatever way it is, but give them some positive feedback. So to kind of summarize this, I want to make sure I got all the pieces. Number one is we want to have sponsors. We don't want our whole career dependent on the sponsors. We want to have them so they can open doors for us. We also want to be in a workplace where we can shine because we are doing the job beyond what it requires so that we can get noticed. We also need to let people know what it is we want to do. And then when we do have what I call diversity collisions, have the courage to have the conversation with the individual with whom we're having that collision. Because when you don't do that, what happens is you go to somebody else who can't help you with that at all, usually like, somebody outside of work, and you commiserate with them, and you talk about how awful it is. Well, they can't fix it because they're not working here. So we want to use that courage, because remember, if you don't use it up, it's going to be wasted. Use that courage, have the conversation. And if you get everything from that person that says they are not hearing you, they just don't, then you might need to make some other decisions, some other people you need to work with, and that kind of thing. So I'm looking at the clock, and I know there's never a great time to hear a speaker or to come to a workshop. So we have run out of time. It has been my honor to spend time with you. You're going to have a fabulous week and have fun with my best friend, Tracy Brown. I know you know her already, so she's going to have wonderful things in store for you. And I leave with you what I brought to you in the first place. Ubuntu. I am because we are. We are because I am. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Lenora, for your outstanding messaging today as how we can make our collective diversity journey down the yellow brick road using this fable. I thought it was fabulous. It really helps to kind of put that message together. We've learned so much, and I'm sure that everyone's been inspired to use our courage, our heart, our minds, our authenticity. That really stood out to me. While avoiding distractions, make those flying monkeys go away. I'm going to remember that forever. To truly become more inclusive in everything that we do. On behalf of WMATA, we have a token of our appreciation. I'd like you to come up and accept this. Let me unwrap it here.
Fantastic.
One of our cool
Love
little
it.
pylons.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Let's get the picture. Let's get the picture. Thank you. I love trains, so this is going to go right away.
Excellent. Okay, so now, before we adjourn, please take your hand and reach underneath your chair. And this applies to anyone who might be in an overflow room, and see if you have an envelope taped underneath. If you do, go like this. A lot of people are coming up with envelopes. Okay. So if you, yay. Okay, so if you found an envelope, then congratulations, you are a door prize winner. What you need to do now is, as you leave, take that envelope to the registration table out front and collect your prize. And thank you all for coming today. And again, thank you to our wonderful speaker, Lenora. Really appreciate it.